So
okay,
good.
I'm going to accept. There you go. Sorry.
I love that this is now the start of the podcast. Well, do you know what? I'm going to say welcome. And I hope everybody else really enjoyed that, because that was like the perfect start. So Martin, welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you this morning?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm happier now that I've managed to fully interrupt your intro to your podcast. But by the way, for people that don't know, Brooke was just telling us that she does the same intro to podcasts and people moan at her for it. Or people say that you do the same thing all the time, and I said that I wouldn't interrupt, and I did interrupt, and actually I didn't mean to.
It's kind of perfect though, right? Like now it'll be something different for people to listen to. They'll be like, oh, we changed up the
Yeah. I just think they'll just be like, that guy interrupted her then. So it's fine. It's all right. Good start. I'm going to let you talk now.
So I ask everybody the same first question, and I'll preface it a bit, because I believe, and I also know that you believe, that everybody's disability is completely individual. So how do you refer to your disability?
I've got cerebral palsy. Really? I think I don't that's a good question actually, because I don't think I consciously have thought about how I refer to my disability. Most of the time I don't, if you know what I mean. I never refer to it as the first thing that I say, if you know what I mean, and it's not really a point of reference. It's like, hi, I'm Martin, how are you? And then you know that people are always kind of, once they ask me about it, they'll be like, what have you got? I've got cerebral palsy, which means that when I was born, which was 3 months premature because I'm inpatient. I was born 3 months premature. I've got a little bit of brain damage, and unfortunately the part of my brain that got damaged affected certain parts of my body, and that hence meant that I've got cerebral palsy, and you get it from birth, and it's not degenerative in my case, and I use a wheelchair to get around. It's basically what I think that's my script. You know what I mean?
Because some people do have the same thing that they say, because when you are born with a disability, I think you are asked all of the time throughout your life, and I don't think it's ever going to stop either. Either what happened or how did it happen or something along those lines. And to answer that question, you always have 3 sentences, be like, this is what it is, this is how it happens, that's the end of the situation.
I think that just keeps it very be very clear, direct, so that I don't know about you, but I mean, how do you refer to yours?
So it's really interesting. So I always just say I don't have a hand, and then I didn't even realize that there was a technical term for that until earlier this year. I genuinely didn't realize. Yeah, exactly, right. I didn't realize that my disability is called congenital limb loss or something along those lines, and I had not a notion of what that meant until I had to fill in a form for a competition that I was in, to be so what is your disability? And I was like, do you want a picture? That's probably a better way of showing you what it is.
I'll send you a pic. No, sorry, you've not put your hand in it. No, that's the
exactly, that's the whole point.
But you know what, again, it's sometimes congenital limb. What? Congenital limb what?
I think it's congenital limb loss or congenital limb difference. I think it just depends.
I prefer yours. I don't have a hand.
I just don't have a hand.
That's fine. Because yours, mate, honestly, I'm being serious. Yours, that sounds like something that you can catch.
It does.
If you says to somebody, I've got congenital limb, loss or whatever, they'd be like, what? It sounds like something.
Where did you get that from? The STD clinic?
Yeah. It's just see if you touch the hand that you can't see, then you'll lose your hand.
It does sound like that.
It's like those old ones when you say, I used to say to my old nephews and that, you just go, how did you get your disability? And I'd tell them all sorts of stories, I'd got it through touching a rusty nail and stuff. Just loads of stupid, obscure stories. But your one, congenital limb, disfigurement or loss or whatever it is, cerebral palsy, when you say I've got cerebral palsy, I'm like, oh, it's just no, I've just got a bit of brain damage, it's all right, it's fine, I'll go to birth. I feel like the names themselves make it a little bit worse.
Yeah, and they don't make it easy to relate to either. So as soon as you say anything in medical jargon, people are like, oh, sounds so serious. And I'm like, it literally means I don't have a hand. I was like, but it's just doctor speak. And I don't speak doctor, so there's no point in me
I know that this is your podcast and you ask the questions, but can I ask you one?
Yeah, go on.
Because I went to a disabled school, a disabled high school, but it was just for kids that had like, you know, physical disabilities, like the pupil had physical, so we still get educated like under like the mainstream curriculum and all that kind of shit. Like, but a lot of my mates had like missing limbs, like missing upper limbs, or like they had like the limbs where they had little fingers, and be like how do kids react to your?
It really depends, actually. Really depends, because I think kids who are like exposed to some form of disability in their life are like, it is what it is. But then you have like other kids who just stare. And at one point, I'm like, I completely understand you're staring. It is different. I'm like, I'm so aware of that. I'm not going to like shame you for staring, because roles reversed, I probably would do the exact same thing. Right. But then at the same time, I'm like, your parents probably should have either had like a conversation with you about difference, or like you can come and ask me. Like I'd rather you came and asked me than just sat there and watched me eat. Like, it's an interesting one, but I don't think there's no like right or wrong with it. Like it's just dependent on the child, and like I'm always happy to have a conversation with children, but with adults it's a bit different.
Do you ever wave to them with a hand that they can't see?
No, I don't, but maybe I should.
The only reason I ask is because it must be quite, because with my disability, like I think I get like a bit of both. When the kid looks at me with the wheels and stuff, with the wheelchair, I think like there's two where they're like, that's pretty cool. Like the fact that he's got a wheelchair and he's sitting on wheels, and it's pretty cool how he can move like that. And then you get the ones that are like, Mom, they're really loud and they're like, Mom, why is that man's legs not working? And you're just like, and you can see like the really awkward like parent being like, shut up, they either go shut up, or they're either like ask them, and then they do ask sometimes, and then when you say to them, oh, my legs don't work because I was like that when I was born, then they're pretty much like, bam, that's it. But I'm always dead fascinated to find out what people are like with different disabilities, like what their world's like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because it is so different for everyone.
Yeah,
it is. It's so different for everyone, and like I've said this before, is that you could have the same like, and I hate to say like diagnosis because I think that's a really disgusting term for disability, but you could have like the same diagnosis on paper, but how your world and how your life and how you interact with your own disability is going to be completely different to someone with the same like prognosis or whatever as you.
Yeah, even adults to a certain extent. Like I think adults have got a really funny. I mean, do you think that you get with adults, like for me with the wheelchair, I think it's better now. But I always remember when I was younger being told, this woman knew me for years, and then I went into the wheelchair when I was 13. And this woman knew me for years, and then all of a sudden she started talking to me weird and asking me for like noddy and stuff. Just like really weird. Like her perception of me had completely changed from walking and then being in the wheelchair sort of thing. So it was such a weird. Do you get that as with adults? Do people, the adults sort of, I don't know, shit themselves around you?
But I think what happens for me is like if it's like specifically in winter, obviously when it's like colder outside, clothes are not designed to fit the person with the one hand. So like it doesn't look like I'm disabled until I take off my jumper or I take off like my coat, and then people are like, ugh. And they're like, oh my god, like I'm so sorry, and I'm like, sorry for what? I'm like, it's not existed my entire life. Like there's no obituary for my hand. Like we don't need to go through this.
That's perfect. I'm so sorry for your loss.
I've never really spoken about like the difference between summer and winter, because obviously summer everybody's bodies are very much out, like it's hot, it's like, so there's no hiding a sense, and it's not that I hide it in the winter at all, but it's that clothes don't fit for my body type. Like it doesn't exist. Like shorter arms on one side of the body would not make any retail promises for anyone. Like it wouldn't make sense. And also like I'm not going to go and get it tailored because it's expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. That is the issue, and it's very much like it's, as you say, you know, other people that have got similar disabilities, but none of them are like yours specifically. Like it's the same with cerebral palsy, isn't it? So there's not one person apparently in the world that's got cerebral palsy the same. So when you talk about my disability or your disability, you can only talk about it from your perspective, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
so with cerebral palsy, how has that impacted like your career and the career choices that you made?
It has and it hasn't. like when I played basketball and stuff, like when I played basketball, like Captain Scotland, and played basketball at a high level, like athlete level sort of thing. Like I never realised how cerebral palsy impacted me back then. So when I was in high school or when I was in secondary school, as we would call it, and then when I went and played basketball at the high level between the ages of like 16 to like 23, 24, like I thought I was just like everyone else. I thought like, but then I could never quite make it up to that next level, like between like Scotland and Great Britain, for example. So I could never make it to that Paralympic level. And I was determined to make it to that level, but I just couldn't do it. And then one day, my basketball coach said to me, he's like, I'm going to film you. I want you to take 100 shots, and I'm going to film you taking those 100 shots, and then I want you to come back and have a look at it. And I was like, right, okay. And like in basketball, you'll know if anybody's kind of like a sport nut like me, you kind of look at people's form and you look at how they do things, and you think it's not about the power, it's not about the effort, it's more about the technique and the form and everything. And you go like, this is how. So in basketball, you've got your ball here, you've got it in your chest, and then you do the elephant trunk thing to take the shot. So you follow up and follow through, snap the wrist, and that's how I was trained to take my shot. But then when I took my 100 shots and then I came back, that's not what my shot looked like. That's not what my shot looked like. I remember like saying to my coach, like, what the heck is that shot? Like, what? And he was like, that is your shot. You've always took that shot. Like, always. And then, do you know what it's like when it comes to a sporting point of view? It's like your brain knows what to do.
Yeah.
It knows how to do it. And you've got the body for it. Definitely. You've got like, but the signals that your brain's sending to your body and how you imagine you're doing things is completely different.
Yeah.
So in my head, and I think maybe some people have got that as well, but I think in cerebral palsy terms, it's a lot more extreme. Like,
yeah.
And actually, there isn't a cerebral palsy wheelchair basketball player that plays for Great Britain. It doesn't exist. I'm not saying that that's the sole reason. There were just better basketball players than me, but there is like a link there between that top level sport at that level, and then not being able to play, but also so that impacted I would say that it's in a sense there's a female cerebral palsy player, Siobhan Fitzpatrick, who plays wheelchair basketball for Great Britain. She's really good, but she's the only one I've ever seen like in the men's game. There isn't, so that impacted on it. And then my career, and then on the flip side of it, it's really helped my career because I couldn't get to that level in terms of being an athlete and getting paid enough to live a life that was sustainable.
Yeah.
Like Channel 4 were obviously looking for presenters from the Paralympic Games in London 2012, and I had already left basketball in 2010. So I decided to go for a competition to become the next Paralympic presenter, and it was me and like the likes of Alex Brooker from The Last Leg, and like loads of other people that you've probably seen now. And then we were all sat in a room, like on the 28th of November 2010. We were all sat in this room, and I think Alex went to Leeds University. He was studying sports journalism or something, and I was, just finishing basketball, and there was a whole bunch of us. We didn't really know what we were doing. Didn't know, and then they trained us up, and then we got to London 2012. So I think cerebral palsy's helped my career massively, but also hindered it at the same time in a different way. And now, like 10 years into my sort of life as a broadcaster, like it's become a problem again because I feel like diversity is not included enough within.
Yeah.
So as I said to you, you heard it when I spoke to you about it before when we first met, when you were in the audience, like a lot more needs to be done in terms of representation and how, how disability is represented and stuff. So I think my cerebral palsy sometimes stopped me from getting stuff that I would have got if I didn't have it.
It's interesting because talking about broadcasting, I was wondering if you'd ever face like particular barriers to entry in that like world, because obviously you're very correct when you say that there is such little representation in that world. Don't get me wrong, there is some to like a very, very small degree, but there isn't enough. And I was just wondering if you yourself had faced barriers to entry there.
Yeah, well, recently, so I left the BBC. Like 9 weeks ago to go freelance. So I decided that I was going to go on more. And the reason for that is because when I had a children's contract, when I was working at Newsround, which was like a staff job at the BBC, like you would have your children's contract, present Newsround, be a journalist every day, which was great. So there was no barriers from that point of view. But the difficulty was you would think that the BBC was a really like progressive, inclusive, organisation. That once you become staff there's inroads to move in. You can move up, you can go and do
move up and move sideways.
Shows. And that isn't really the case, particularly as well when it comes to disability, I think, because I'll give you an example. So I had a meeting with an exec, I won't tell you who it is, but I had a meeting with like a daytime exec, BBC daytime sort of TV. And that exec said to me, the words that person said to me was, I think you're a really good presenter. So I was like, oh, thank you very much. And then they says, but there are loads of good presenters. And I was like, yeah, that's correct. And then the person went on to say, and I'm not going to give you a job just because you're in a wheelchair. So then it was like, so I kind of sat back and I was like, right. And then I was like, so first of all, to answer your question, on the first one about me being a good presenter, like, I know, and thanks for that, because I've worked really hard to get where I am. But the difference between me and other presenters is that I'm the person sat in front of you and they're not. So this is to answer that question quickly and swiftly. It's like, that's the difference between me and them. And secondly, I've never used my disability to sort of expect a job.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about it as a BBC exec from a business point of view, then surely you must see that if the BBC have trained me up for 10 years in loads of different live environments, at loads of massive events in the world, on a variation of different subjects, and yet you don't think that me being in a wheelchair actually as a competent broadcaster is strong enough for the BBC, considering that you don't have enough. So then I sent a few emails to like the Director General at the BBC. He referred me to the diversity people and I asked him if I could be. So it was never about being put on big TV shows. It was about being part of panels that made decisions or helping from the inside. And I offered that up, and they never took me up on it. And it was one of those things where I sat at Christmas last year and I thought to myself, I was quite frustrated because I felt for what that woman had said that my integrity had been sort of questioned, and that for me is like the biggest problem. It's like, I don't mind the fact if you tell me that I'm not going to get this job because you don't think I'm fit for it, then that's good, that's fine. I can work on it and move forward. But the fact that somebody questions my integrity and thinks that I just expect to get a job because I'm in a wheelchair is actually a big problem for me. And then when you speak to the head of the BBC, the man in charge, and he just refers you down, and then they just don't really take you up on it. And then you find out through the scheme that they've got to get more representation that actually in the last 10 years, disability representation in the TV and media has dropped rather than gone up. So then I just thought, no, like I'm just going to have to leave. I'm going to have to leave in order to like keep on the path, really, which is a real shame. So I think that it's kind of came around full circle where London 2012 opened doors, and then it went good for a while, and now we're back to, I don't know, kind of being it'd be a bit of an extreme expression, but it's like being the last dog at the bowl.
And it's interesting that you say about 2012, because I think I remember London 2012 so well, because I think it brought around so much awareness for disability, and like it did so good for the community, like it did. However, it's tailed off, and like that representation is no longer on the TV. Like you don't have the same, like the people were having really interesting conversations regarding disability, because obviously we were hosting and we had the Paralympics as well. People were having such interesting conversations around it. And I remember thinking like, wow, like this is so good. And at that point in time, I was obviously like, this is 10 years ago. So I didn't really know that disability would become such a big part of my life as it has now. But I remember thinking, wow, this is like an amazing cultural change. And like 10 years later, I'm looking back and I'm like, the change lasted for maybe 2 years at most. And now it's kind of back to like not watching people fight, but like you're kind of gearing up for like a big, but you want a big cultural conversation to have and happen and have like a big change, but it's you're gearing up for that because it's dropped off. The conversation is no longer there.
And that's when Newsround really nailed it, actually, to be fair, because when I got that job at Newsround, it wasn't a job to be a disability correspondent, and it wasn't a job to sort of, talk purely on disabled stories that impacted on people that had disabilities. It was a job that I was a presenter on Newsround, and that was it. Mm-hmm. So the way that they saw it and the way that I saw it is that what will happen is when the first time that I presented Newsround, people will naturally go, oh, look at that guy in the wheelchair, because they've never seen me before. But then the more consistently I did it, then they would be like, oh, it's Martin. Mm-hmm. So they understood that the whole point of the change is a longevity thing. Like, people are going to wonder about the chair the first time, but then as we progress, you'll just become a name that the kids will become familiar with, wheelchair or no wheelchair, because you're delivering the stories and delivering the same content as what any other presenter is at that time.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a real mix where they're trying too hard, the media, to get it right, and that makes it awkward, and then they keep creating these sort of roles and schemes and whatever, whereas there's plenty of people out there that are just good at presenting, and there's plenty of people out there that are just good at podcasting, plenty of disabled people out there that are just as good at anything else that they want to do. But the issue is that it has to be made such a big deal of. Yeah. And maybe on both sides, maybe that goes for the people with a disability as well, I don't know. But we're definitely at a crossroads, I think, where things need to change now and quickly. And money needs to be put in, and investment needs to be put into people with disabilities to achieve what they need to achieve without it seeming like they're doing us a favour.
Yeah. And I think that's such a big thing, is that you never want it to be tokenistic, because you never and as you said earlier, like, you never wanted to get a job or like relied on the fact that you were in your wheelchair to get a job. That was never part of like your MO. And I think that's such a big thing for disabled people, is that you never want to get a job just because of your disability. But at the same time, like, if that job means that you get more representation out there for a wider community, then that's like a massive benefit and like a massive side effect that's so good. So it is such a double-edged sword.
It is. You can't win, really, because people are always going to be questioning, what your disability is. Even the people that employ you will be worrying about what your disability, or what can we do for you. And it's like, well, I'll let you know. And that's what was good. I mean, Newsround used to have me down trenches. They had me up in mountains. They had me in snow. They had me in 45-degree sun, on beaches, in the sea, all sorts of places. So, but that was like a relationship that I had built throughout my time there. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So you set the boundaries. I think it's the disabled person that sets the boundaries for that. And you need to make people aware about what the line is, where the lines are, what your blueprint is in terms of how you like to be spoken to, how you like to be addressed if that disability issue comes up, if it's a problem or not, and what access needs you require, and what help you might need when you're doing your job. So, like, you can't expect an employer to know that.
No, and that's like, it's like mind reading. Like, nobody can do it.
Yeah,
it's fact. I like to think that through hardship, everybody can recognize a positive trait within themselves. And I was just wondering, have you ever found yourself going through some form of hardship, but noticing that you have like a really positive trait that you really enjoy about yourself after going through said hardship?
Yeah, I'm pretty relentless. Like, my word that I use all the time is that I've got a fear of failure. So like, my biggest fear is like failing at anything. So, and I know where it comes from, actually, because if you can imagine, right, so when I was younger, I used to walk with cerebral palsy, but I used to walk like a duck listening to rap music. It was a bit like I'd waddle a little bit, and it was a bit like, it was weird. And then I used to have like the splints for Forrest Gump used to have, like that, with my big disability boots, these big black like disability boots with the toggles that would go around. Yeah. And then, and like, my mum used to insist now in primary school, kids wear like polo shirts or jumpers or like, like stuff that's quite casual. And then my mum would insist on me wearing like a blazer and a shirt and tie most days.
Oh,
like,
I love that.
Like, and then I had like a side pattern, like just like what I've got now. I've got it back. And then like because of my disability, my eyes, cerebral palsy, I was born with eyes like this, like they used to go in like that, like googly eyes. So I had these like glasses as well. So you could imagine me like my little blazer. People used to call me Side Pattern Martin, my little tie and that, right? So they used to call me Side Pattern Martin. And then like what had what had happened is that I was like such a geek, right? And like they would be like, I'd have my little glasses and I'd be looking at the board like that, like just staring at it. But see, because I had cerebral palsy in primary school in Scotland, right? They just thought now you've got your groups, so you've got like your smart groups that's in like the red group for reading, red group for maths, and then it goes down, and then you've got the really crap group for like, that's at the bottom, like the yellow group, and they're like underachievers. So you had like your red group, your yellow group, and then Martin and his best mate Jason below that. So that was like us. But it's not because we weren't intelligent. It was just because Jason, I don't know why they did that, but I met Jason in year 2 in primary school when we became inseparable. Like he's like married to my cousin now. He's got like 2 kids, like we're best friends. Like
small town.
But Jason, but Jason, right? So the reason why I'm scared of failure is because from a very, very young age, I was set up for failure, I think. So like there was never an option for me. Like I was even though I had cerebral palsy and like maybe I didn't have the physical abilities, I was still always determined and relentless, like always, like it never ever bothered me. So I would play football, but I wasn't allowed to join the school football team because they were worried that I was going to hurt myself or whatever. And then like the fear of failure thing just comes from that. Like I think like basically trying to prove a point, like if I get a task at hand, then like I will make sure that I will bring. So in my mindset, I've already at a disadvantage because that's how I was treated when it came to being younger. Yeah. So in my default, my blueprint mindset is always be better than everybody else. Be better, be better, be better, do better, do better. You can do better. So I suppose the positive trait is that it's also a good and a bad trait because I become obsessed with like achieving goals and making sure that, and it's not a competitive thing with anyone else. I never look at anyone and I never think to myself, I'm going to beat you. And I've never been that type of kid, ever. Yeah. Like, I've never been that type of guy. But with myself, I'm like relentless. Like, relentlessly, like, just constantly on a mission to make sure that whatever I try to achieve, I'll achieve it. Like, and that's... It's a good trait, but also if you're my partner, for example, if you're my girlfriend or you're my daughter or you're somebody else, that can be quite difficult.
It's really interesting that you say this because I have recognized so much of myself in what you just said. Yeah. And I think it is like, you're so right. It does stem a little bit from childhood and the fact that, you know, people always saw you starting off as with some form of disadvantage. And it was almost like a F you to be like, I'm going to be exactly the same, if not better. Yeah. And it does stay with you because even now I'm still very much like that myself. Like I always used to say, I'm incredibly tenacious and like I'll go after whatever I want and I will get it. It might take me a bit longer, it might look a bit different, but I will get it. Like it doesn't matter. Like I'll get it. And it's so interesting that you say that because I'm like, oh, maybe this is like a disabled people thing. Like maybe this is a disabled person thing. Like
I think it's like when you've been treated like you're. I think it's from the offset before the gun's gone off and you get your chance to get out the traps. Yeah. I always use sport analogies to do things because it's how it works in my brain. Like before I was even born, I was already considered to be someone that wasn't going to achieve what I have. Yeah. And I suppose what I don't know about you, but my parents and growing up and stuff, like I don't know what my parents' expectations were of me, right? Mm-hmm. It was never spoken about. But I think when I look back at things, I think that maybe they did think that I was either going to just sit and not do much or work in like a factory for disabled people. That, do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And then it was very interesting. I don't know how you were treated in school, but in my school in Scotland, like they just treated me like I was, I didn't have the capacity to be, to be able to compete academically with these kids, and maybe they were right. But like I was saying, I don't think my parents knew what I was going to achieve. And I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that was going to be the case. I always knew that people thought, even people closest to me, without them saying it, they always thought they didn't have high expectations about what my future was going to be like in terms of achieving things. Yeah. Or whatever. So that pissed me off. So I would always be like, and then, so that was it really. I'm relentless and I've got a fear of failure.
Which is like a double-edged sword in itself.
Really bad actually. Like when I get something in my head and when I get into something, or if there's a task at hand, like it's very tunnel visioned. It's very like I will achieve this, and my poor family and my poor daughter and whatever else need to put up with my my weird nature when that does take place.
Yeah. And I can completely, like I said, like I recognize so much of what you just said, because I feel like I'm also the same, is that I never tend to back down from something unless like there's a very big reason as to why I should back down. And usually that might come from like external sources where someone's like, okay, like you're taking it too far now, and you're like, upon reflection, maybe I did take it too far. Maybe I should step down. Like maybe I should.
I think that's like pushing yourself, isn't it? It's like,
yeah,
it's good that you've got that thing in your head and you've got good people around you going like, this isn't going the way that it should. Like it's not right, and you've got like that filter in your head almost where it's like, this is a lost cause now. Like, what did you want to do when you were growing up?
Do you know what? I had no idea. At the beginning, I really wanted to be a marine biologist. Like I thought I was going to save the whales. Like genuinely thought that's what I was going to do.
Still could.
Yeah, but I'm just not very good at science. Like me and science are not
a big part of it.
Yeah, really big part of it. I was just not very good. And actually, I'd probably go as far to say that I was probably quite mishandled at school. I think they always thought I've always been very loud, and like I'm very much like a massive extrovert. And I think I was just totally mishandled at school. I don't think they really knew how to deal with me. And I've always been very upfront and very honest, and like sometimes to my detriment. But like that's, for me, it's always better to like err on the side of honesty than
do you piss people off with your honesty? Do you get in trouble?
Yeah. It's like my mouth has got me in a lot of trouble. But in saying that, I think because I was always that way, like I went to a boarding school. So from the ages of 13 to 18, I was just incredibly honest. And like that type of environment doesn't necessarily work that well for someone who is just upfront and honest. Because, you know, like you're in a boarding house of 60 girls and like I was the only person being like, you're being a dick, stop. Or like, you know, teacher asking me like a really stupid question, I'd be like, that was a really bad question, like you should, like that's no, like reframe what you just said, because the answer is going to be not the one that you want. And I've always been that person, and I've always challenged authority, not because I was trying to be awkward, but because I didn't really understand what the question was. And like I've never been ashamed to be like, I don't understand what you're asking me and why you're asking this question, it doesn't make any sense.
Do you think you've got a thing about authority?
Maybe a little bit, which is probably why like I tend to like do things for myself and like for myself in terms of like work. I find it very difficult to work under people. And that's like probably part and parcel of that. But I think maybe a little bit of it is that adults didn't really know how to handle me. So for a really long time, I could get away with saying stuff and they'd be like, oh, it's just Brooke, you know, she's only got one hand. And I'd be like, yeah, like that's true. And so like that became like part of my makeup. And then I think that's maybe part of the reason I am the way I am, is because people were so shocked that I was so honest.
How can someone with only one hand be that brutal?
Yeah, like I think that's maybe part and parcel of what it is. They'd be like, oh wow, like she's really speaking her truth, like she's being very honest. And I think that just comes from because I knew that I had to ask for things and I wasn't going to be awkward about it. If I needed someone to help me carry my books, I'd be like, can you please help me out? Like I can't, you can see I physically can't carry that many books. And people would be like, oh wow, yeah, like I will do. And
but people normally do that, don't they? They normally would help you, wouldn't they? Like that's the thing for me. Like people are like, oh, I want to do it myself, and it's like actually when you ask people for help, really they will do it. Genuinely, like there's a lot of good people out there that you know that I was like, I don't get enough help. It's like there's loads of people out there that are willing to help people. I
also think part of it stems from also accepting that you can ask for help, because I think a lot of people like to champion the fight, and like that's good up until a certain point, but if it's becoming detrimental, then it's not good for anybody.
Yeah, I agree. And actually that is quite a proud thing though, isn't it? I've been in situations where I've not wanted to ask for help, and like you go, I really want to get up that escalator on my own. Like when I've been in London, for example, and like the lift isn't working, and I've been like, and I can get up escalators sometimes where I hold on to like the, you know what I mean? And I'm holding on and I'm like, yeah. And then, but sometimes the escalators are just too big. And then you're like, and you're trying to judge it, but you're trying to basically G yourself up as well and be like, I can do this. But really in the back of your mind, you know that you've got to ask somebody to stand behind you to make sure that you don't end up falling 40 feet. Like, so you're just like, so yeah, it's a bit biting the bullet sometimes and sort of letting your pride get away.
Yeah, have a bit of a hit and like just accepting it is what it is.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So I like to ask, do you think you have a piece of advice for either a younger version of yourself or for a younger person with the same disability as you?
You know, I wouldn't give any advice to my younger self because what's the point? I've already made the mistakes I've made. I've done the good things that I'd set out to do.
Yeah.
But for anybody who's got cerebral palsy, like, so if it's something a bit similar to me, like embrace it, sort of thing would be the thing for me. Like I was always the type that embrace. I don't know whether I was just really blind, like whether I had this ability to be able to shut everything else out. I didn't have the chance to like be like self-pitying. Like, you know yourself, you've got Scottish blood in you, you know how this works.
And I literally know exactly what you're about to say.
You don't have any space, time or effort, or you've not got the right to be feeling sorry for yourself.
No.
Like, my parents and my family were very much like, oh well, this is how it is now, get on with it, sort of thing. And then I think I kind of adopted that in a sense, because when I was younger in the playground and I did have my little calipers, my little splints and my glasses and my side pattern and my blooming blazer and my jacket and whatever, I like just did what they wanted to do. Like, I wasn't very popular at school. It was just me and Jason, and like I just got on with it anyway. It never ever fazed me. I never went home at night thinking I'm being treated really badly.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? And then when I went to high school, like I went to the high school for people with disabilities. So I was like in my element. Do you know what I mean? I was like, these are my people type of thing. Like, absolutely loved it, man. Had a blast.
Yeah.
Like, had a great time. Loads of electric wheelchairs flying by, Zimmer frames, people with no hands, people with no legs, people with no arms, people with like respiratory issues. There was like loads of things, and you kind of get like a real sense of self.
Yeah.
Actually, and I think that's what I had in Glasgow growing up. And that's what I found through meeting other disabled people. I don't know whether you get the same thing, but whenever I meet disabled people and hear their stories, it kind of reaffirms like where your place is in terms of how you're mentally supposed to approach things. So that would be it. Like, get to know yourself, get comfortable with it, own it, and just crack on. Like, that's because as soon as you get comfortable with your disability and get comfortable with who you are, and you'll go through the normal teenage phase, you'll go through the normal phases of like growing up, but that's not individual, that's not unique to you. Like, what is unique to you is like getting used to that disability and getting used to like how you adapt to it. You see, once you do that, then you can become yourself. Like, you can truly become your true self once you get past that point where you're like, I'm not worried about being in the wheelchair. I know how to get myself dressed. I know how to do all this sort of stuff, so I can comfortably walk out any door in the morning and be like, okay, this is going to be a good day to be a wheelchair Martin or whatever. So
Martin.
A wheelchair Martin. So like that would be my advice. Get to know yourself and own your disability outright, because then no one can judge you then if you know yourself better.
I love that as well, because I didn't realize until I was much older that actually I was very secure and confident in my disability.
You're insecure.
In my disability, absolutely. Like I didn't realize that they weren't mutually exclusive. And I didn't realize that there were disabled people out there who weren't confident in their disability. And like, for me, that was mind blowing, because like I've always been this way, so how can I expect to be another way? And then there was a whole conversation about acquiring disabilities, and like that's a completely different ball game. So like it's not something that I can comment on because I don't have that experience. But being confident in your disability and being confident in who you are, I think, is such a key takeaway, because if you're like, you have a disability, the likeliness is it's not going to go away. And
yeah, exactly.
It is with you for the rest of your life. And so embrace it and accept it for what it is, and like make the best of it.
Yeah, and the confidence thing is right. Like, I think like confidence is a funny word, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but I have some days and I call them cerebral palsy days. I had one yesterday. Like, I had one yesterday. And don't get me wrong, I'm talking like, for me, the best version of myself. Sometimes when I'm giving advice to people, that's the best version of myself. But
yeah,
like confidence is a funny word, like, because some days you're not confident with it. And some days, like we're talking about, like with clothes, or whether it be going to work, or whether it be just a day where you're just not feeling confident about something, or whether you're not moving quite as well.
Yeah.
Like, confidence ebbs and flows when it comes to disability. I think no matter what disability you've got, that is the one consistency that I can say, whether you've acquired it, whether it's visible, whether it's non-visible, or whether you were born with it. I feel like you have your days where you're like fucked off with it.
Yeah, and I think that's so true.
Yeah, and that's confidence is like, it'll get easier as time goes, I think, or you just need to accept the days where you're just not going to quite be like,
100%. Yeah,
can't be asked with it. Do you know what I mean? I can't be bothered with this today. Can't be bothered with it. But getting to know yourself is always the best way forward, and then the confidence will come secondly with it. On the days where, so that even on the days where I had my cerebral palsy day yesterday, where it felt like, like kind of like one of those days, like if I tried to touch my nose with my finger, it wouldn't happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it would, because that would never impact me like that. But you just get days where you wake up, when you get up out of bed or whatever, it's just not quite flowing.
You're not firing on all engines. Like,
and that's not just a disability thing, but the disability thing doesn't help.
Yeah.
Like, you have your days where you're actually like pumped up and ready to go, and then you have your days where you're like, I have to have a word with myself in order just to make sure that I put my socks on and get ready to go. Do you know what I mean? Like, it sounds stupid, but that's what I mean. And I think that is disability for me. That's what defines it. Like, every day is that for us with disabilities, you've got your own little internal fights.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really interesting one, because I think you're right in what you're saying, is that nobody is excluded from having internal battles. That's like disability, no disability, doesn't matter. Everyone has them. But I think having a disability, to a certain extent, that extra little internal battle can just be a little bit louder. A bit like, oh, not today. Like, you need to have a bit of a word with yourself and be like, okay, it's fine. We've survived every single day up until now.
And then when you get older, it's like relationships, innit? Have you ever been on Tinder or Bumble or anything like that? Right?
Nightmare. I actually think they're cesspits.
Honestly, man, that place is such a space. Like, so during lockdown and stuff like that, like, I've been with my partner for like a year now, maybe over a year or whatever. But see, before that, like I remember my first Tinder profile was like, it didn't really have my disability on it. So I'd put pictures up that didn't really show that I was in a wheelchair. And then you get like lots of matches and stuff. And then you would see, as soon as you put a picture up in a wheelchair, like, it was like a social experiment. Just like that. What's yours like?
So I make it very obvious that I've only got one hand. So like, I've never not made it like, I will purposely put up a picture, like all of my pictures include like their full body shots, because I will never stay away from the fact that I've only got one hand. And I think, maybe I don't get as many matches or whatever, and like that doesn't really faze me all that much. But the thing that I think about in the back of my head is that if you're not coming into my life already knowing, and you're not accepting of it, then you're not for me anyway. Like, we're not going to be friends. We're not going to get on.
And
I talk about it a lot. Like, I do this.
So I don't even think that it was consciously a thing for me. Like, I put pictures up, and then you put, you put your best self forward, in a sense. Like, you try and show yourself. And then when I put myself like full body shots, then it did change. But it's just interesting, isn't it? Like,
it is a massive social experiment.
when you step out the door, then once you've done with those internal battles or there's external struggles with like getting from A to B or navigating like through something, then you've got other things to deal with, like what you were saying, like fashion, relationships, like you know, there's loads of different facets to it. Like, so that's why the younger thing, speaking to my younger self and saying own it, then at least if any of them, whatever happens with any of those situations, then you're kind of like, it'll be fine. Do you know what I mean?
And at the end of the day, like, you always have your own back, and that's something that I like to remind myself, is that you've got to look after number one first. And people might say that I've got quite a lot before that I can be quite selfish, and I'm like, I'm not being selfish. I was like, I am looking after number one first, because I have to have my own back, especially on this.
I think we're quite similar in a lot of regards. Like, I've been called selfish quite a lot, like from that.
I think it might be our makeup, and also probably where we're from. Gonna put it out
there. I think so. But then also, like, I do some cheesy things when I'm about to broadcast live. Like, I did it when I played basketball, and I don't know if you do things to sort of get yourself ready for like your CrossFit, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I say things to myself, like I visualize things, like I do things, I do weird stuff. Like, I always say things to myself before, like the countdown before I go live. I'm always like, back yourself. And it's funny that you said that, because that's like, because obviously you're going to get like adrenaline pumping through your body, and you're going to get a bit of anxiety as a result of that, and your breathing's not quite going to be like right. And it's funny how you say little things to yourself and you visualize little things to slow it all down, to be like, back yourself, back yourself, back yourself. And I say that to myself, and it's so funny that you said it, because that's like my go-to.
I always say it to everyone. I'm like, I back myself 100%, and they're like,
I say it all the time.
I'm like, no, I do back myself 100%. Like, I know that at the end of this recording, this will have been a really interesting conversation. I know it will be, because A, I'm an interesting person, B, you're also an interesting person. That's not me having like a massive ego. It's not me being egotistical,
but you are truthful. You are honest. You are honest. I get annoyed by people that kind of fish for the compliments but aren't willing to back. I don't get annoyed, maybe no, in fact I do get annoyed by people that don't back themselves enough. It really upsets me, and it really frustrates me, actually. Like, it's, and we live in a society like that now, like in that kind of world where it's like you can't back yourself, or else people just think that you're being arrogant. And it's like, no, I've got insecurities, trust me, I've got insecurities, and I don't feel like 100% about my abilities all the time, but I will still back myself. If someone says to me, like, if there's a task in front of me, what's the point in me doing it if I'm not going to? Do you know what I mean? And it really frustrates me when people go, "Oh, I didn't think I was going to do that anyway. Like, I wasn't." It's like an excuse where people will say, "Oh, like I wasn't going to." Like, if somebody wins something and then they're like, "Oh, I'm just quite surprised," but you can tell they're not surprised. Like,
it's like false modesty, isn't it?
Yeah, you're like, you expected to do that. You knew you were going to do that. And it's like, that's fine. Just say it. Call a spade, call a shovel. Like, you know, and that kind of frustrates me when people present, oh no, like, I'm not brilliant, but you're brilliant. So I think that kind of thing, and it's like, no, you know, back yourself all the time.
Yeah, always back yourself.
I always like bag her on to Jessica, my daughter, about it, just like, you're going to be amazing. And actually, I think I've created a monster.
I was literally about to say, have you created a monster?
Totally created a monster, but she's like, I'm brilliant at that. I'm so good at that, you know, Dad. And it's like, that's good. She's 11 now. She's going to high school this year. And she's like really athletic, but she's going to get a real shock when she gets that step up to high school, when she realises that she's not going to be the fastest girl in school anymore, probably. And I'm really looking forward to it, because I'm looking forward to when she comes back to me and she's like, I'm not fast anymore. I'm like, but you will be. You just need to lose to come back.
Back yourself.
Lose to come back up. Like, it's going to teach you so much more, because winning all the time just creates like a horrible human being. Like, you've got to lose. You've got to be humble, like, honest. So that's kind of how my brain works every day. I'm so annoying. Like, and I know it. My missus is like, you're like fucking Coach Carter every day. You're like, in order to win, you have to lose, all that kind of shit. Like, I love a good quote. Do you know what I mean?
I love a good quote. I have a whole section in my phone of like quotes to like, and it's literally called "When You Feel Like Giving Up, Read These Quotes."
Yeah. See on my Spotify, right? If you look at my Spotify playlists, it's like those 10-minute monologues where it's like the really deep voice and they're like, and you can achieve anything, and it's like, and it pure screams at you and like pure tells you to get up and stuff. That's my Spotify all the time. So like I feel like such an idiot sometimes, but I'm like, this is what gets me going, you know, this is what gets me up. And
yeah,
you know, I love a good cheesy quote, you know. I love it.
So interestingly, we've just spoken about what annoys us. I have a particular like set of questions that I find annoy me when it comes to my disability that are asked from like random people, or they can be like a bit too intrusive. So number one is usually, did a shark bite your arm off? No, it didn't. Like,
to be fair though, I find that quite funny, but to be honest,
it can be funny in the right situations, but when it's so like when it's so random and from someone that I've never met in my life, I'm like, I don't owe you any explanation for any of this. So I was wondering, do you have a particular like set of questions that you find either annoying or intrusive, or ones that you're just not really willing to answer from random people?
What I normally do is though, if I get annoyed, so I get that as well. So I get this quite a lot. What I get is it, were you a soldier? Mm-hmm. Get that all the time. I don't know if it's got something to do with my haircut or whether it's got something to do with like
how I hold my...
What?
It's the side parting.
Side parting, Martin. It's like I'm bloody doing it now. But every time I get that, I'm just like, no, I'm not. And they're like, unfortunately, I was one of the unfortunate buggers that was born like this, because there's like a whole like thing about the story, isn't there? Yeah. About like how you acquired that, and people naturally like to glamorize or give it a little bit of a Disney twist,
like some form of entertainment.
Yeah, like that. But it's like, oh, I wonder if he was a soldier, because he obviously works out, takes care of himself, and like in their head, that's what a soldier looks like when he's injured.
Yeah.
And I've always said to my mates, like this is going back to kind of like relationships again, and I'll come back to your question, but it comes back to my mates always had a theory about me and the disability when it came to relationships with women, because they were like, a lot of women would come up and say that to me, like, were you a soldier? And I was like, I wonder why they say that.
Yeah.
I wonder why that's like a thing. And it's like, because they want to look after you. Like, there's a thing about like human beings inherently want an excuse to look after someone, like, or they instinctively like go towards that way. Like, and if you were like, oh, the poor soldier, like, that's like a thing for them. But isn't that weird? Things like that annoy me. Like, things like that really annoy me. And then I've had this question thrown to me 3 times, not just by women, but by men as well. Does it work?
Like, it's alarming how many times I've heard that doing this podcast.
Have you really?
So many times. And like every time I'm like, the first few times I was like, what? And now like I'm never shocked by it, because I think people are so interested in a body that's so different, and like the thought of, you know, not being able to have sex or like, you know, perform a sexual act or whatever is like so mind-blowing for people. And people are so like intrigued by it instinctively, and I'm no longer taken aback when people say that, because I'm like,
I don't get that either. It was actually, I remember it was my best mate's girlfriend asked me it for the first time, and I just met her. I remember my best mate was like absolutely mortified. He was just like, what? Why would you ask him that question, first of all? Like why is that important to you in this situation? Like,
like, how does this help you in any way?
So I've had that before a few times, and I don't really have like a set answer for it. I just kind of shake my head, and I'm just like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, do you know what I mean? And like, but I get like you say, like, does a shark bite off or whatever? Like, did a shark bite it off? I've got quite good quibs for coming back to people. So like, people go like that, oh mate, like, you're pretty fucked, eh? And I like, that's what they'll say to me, like some of them when they're pissed or whatever. And then I'll be like, oh man, if you think I'm fucked, you should see the other guy. Like, and just kind of, and they're like, oh,
and like shake it off a bit.
Yeah, like shake off, because actually, do you know what? Like, in all honesty, I don't care. Like, the thing that bothers me is when people come up to me and like, do you know, like the condescending ones that they think they're really smart, like they think they're intellectual, and they think they're being socially, they think they're like woke. So they think, I've got a cousin, by the way, that type, like, I've got a cousin who's in a wheelchair, you might know him.
Yeah.
Or when they bend down to sit at my level type of thing. Like, those types of people, when they're like, and they give the pauses where they're like, I want to ask a question. Then they look away as if they're all sad, as if they're like gearing up towards this big question.
Yeah.
And you're like, fuck off. Like, honestly, man, like, I have got visions of karate chopping you right now. And that's like, those are the people that annoy me, like the condescending types that think they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you're like, you are making it a lot worse. But the ones that ask me questions, at least you're asking something and you're keeping it interesting for me. And anybody that makes like statements like, oh, you're fucked, eh? You're like,
thank you very much.
Pretty much. The lights are off in that head. It's a circus in there. Pretty much. And they're just like, oh, ha. And they don't really know
where to go.
To sort of say. You could just like, oh, you're allowed to make a statement to me, but, you know.
I can't say it back.
When I respond back with quite a quick-witted, like almost cryptic response, you're a bit like, whoa. And it's like, who's the one with the disability now? Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, that feels like a win to me.
Yeah.
In a sense. So I'm just like, but I don't get myself too bogged down with it, to be honest. I don't think about it too much, because these are the little things, like those little internal things that would annoy me every day. Because I become obsessed. So I'd be like, because I don't know about you, but do you ever sit back and sort of play the tape? Do you ever sit down and like play the tape back on your day when something like that happens?
Sometimes.
Like I play the tape back quite a lot if I've been in a sort of social situation where somebody said something to me or something's happened to me and I respond very impulsively to those things. So like, but sometimes I'll sit back and play the tape and I'll be like, I could have done better there. So like sometimes like I bag little things, like if I've not responded the way that I wanted to, I kind of hope that scenario comes up again or something similar to that, so I can play, so that I can use whatever comeback I've thought about then again. Give me an excuse.
You've got like something in your head, you're like, oh, this is really good. I thought about this before, like it worked perfectly in this scenario.
Please somebody say something good to me today. Please. So yeah.
So I only have one last question for you, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question. But
look, it better be a good one. It better be an absolute doozy. I'm telling you.
If it's not, then like we'll just call the podcast quits now. But
I'll be disappointed. I'll just switch it right off and just be like off. Right.
Can you imagine?
Go on. No, come on.
Oh, so Martin, can you say that you are disabled and proud?
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, of course. I don't know if I'm proud all the time, but I'm definitely disabled. I can say that for sure.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I've honestly really enjoyed this chat.